The worst betrayals always come from the people you trust the most. That's not just some bullshit inspirational quote you'd see on Instagram. It's the harsh reality I learned 6 weeks before what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. My name's Michael Wheeler, 35, and until recently, I was engaged to Claire Daniels, 31. We'd been together for just over 2 years, and I genuinely thought she was the one. Funny how life has a way of slapping you across the face right when you're most comfortable. I've always been disciplined with money. Growing up with parents who lived paycheck to paycheck taught me early that financial security doesn't happen by accident. My dad worked 2 jobs most of my childhood, mechanic by day, security guard by night, and still we barely made ends meet. I remember the hushed arguments behind closed doors, the calls from debt collectors, the constant stress that hung over our small house like a storm cloud. I swore I'd never live that way as an adult. After college, while my friends were blowing their first real paychecks on overpriced downtown apartments and weekend trips to Vegas, I was living with roommates in a dingy 4-bedroom place and putting every spare dollar into investments. I brown bagged my lunch every day. I drove the same beat-up Honda Civic for 10 years. I tracked every penny on a spreadsheet that my friends mocked mercilessly until they hit 30 still living paycheck to paycheck, and I had a 6-figure investment portfolio. By 30, I had saved enough for a down payment and bought my first rental property in Austin. Nothing fancy, a modest 3-bedroom in a decent school district that needed some cosmetic updates. I spent weekends painting cabinets and installing new fixtures while my friends were bar hopping. 2 years later, I bought a second property. By 35, I owned 3 modest but profitable houses that generated steady passive income alongside my job as a financial consultant. Then I met Claire at a mutual friend's housewarming party. She walked in wearing a blue dress that matched her eyes, and I swear the entire room shifted in her direction. She was stunning, the kind of beautiful that makes you forget what you were saying mid-sentence. But it wasn't just her looks. She was smart, funny, and had this laugh that made everyone around her want to join in. That night, we talked until 3 a.m. about everything from our shared love of true crime podcasts to our mutual hatred of cilantro. 2 days later, I asked her out properly. 6 months after that, she moved into my place in downtown Austin. Looking back, there were signs from the beginning, small things I brushed off as quirks or temporary phases, like how Claire always forgot her wallet when we went out to dinner, or how she'd talk about wanting to quit her marketing job to find her passion without any concrete plan for income, or how she'd make comments about my boring investment strategy, suggesting I should live a little rather than saving so diligently. "Life is short, Michael," she'd say, curled up on the couch, wine glass in hand. "What's the point of all this money if we don't enjoy it?" I'd try to explain the concept of delayed gratification, of building wealth for long-term security rather than short-term pleasure. But she'd roll her eyes or change the subject, and I'd let it go because, well, she made me happier than I'd ever been. The proposal happened during a weekend trip to Fredericksburg. I'd arranged a private vineyard tour, and as the sun was setting over the Texas hill country, I got down on one knee and asked her to marry me. The ring was a 1.8-carat oval diamond set in platinum, not the biggest rock in the world, but quality over quantity, right? Claire cried, said yes, jumped into my arms, and we spent the night celebrating with expensive wine and making plans for our future. "I want a spring wedding," she said, curled against me in our hotel bed. "Nothing too big, just something elegant and meaningful." I nodded, kissing her forehead. "Whatever you want, babe, as long as I get to call you my wife at the end of it." We set the date for April 18th, giving ourselves about a year to plan. And that's when the first change happened. So subtle I barely noticed it. The nothing too big wedding Claire had initially described started growing. First, it was the venue. The charming local garden she'd loved was suddenly too simple. Instead, she fell in love with Barton Creek Resort, one of the most expensive venues in Austin. "It's just so perfect, Michael. And we only get married once, right?" Then it was the guest list. Our original 80 people ballooned to 170, many of whom were Claire's extended family members I'd never even heard of, let alone met. "Family is everything," she insisted when I'd raised an eyebrow at cousins 3 times removed making the cut. "Plus they'll all bring gifts." Speaking of gifts, Claire's registry choices made my eyes water. $400 wine glasses? A $900 espresso machine? When I questioned whether we really needed this stuff, she laughed and said, "It's not about need, babe. It's about starting our marriage with the best." Still, I didn't see these as red flags, just wedding excitement. I could afford an expensive wedding, and if it made Claire happy, why not? I suggested we set up a joint account specifically for wedding expenses, with both of us contributing equally. Claire enthusiastically agreed, calling it our first real financial commitment together. I transferred $30,000 to start, and Claire said she'd match it from her savings once she got her year-end bonus from her marketing job. I didn't push when that deadline came and went with only a $5,000 contribution from her side. She explained her bonus was smaller than expected, and she'd make it up later. About 4 months before the wedding, I noticed strange transactions from our wedding account. At first, they seemed wedding adjacent: 400 at a spa, pre-wedding beauty regimen; 700 at Nordstrom, looking for rehearsal dinner outfits; 900 at a high-end restaurant, tasting menu for potential caterer. But they kept coming, and none of them seemed to be actual wedding expenses. When I casually brought it up over dinner, Claire became defensive. "Do you have any idea how stressful wedding planning is? These are all part of the process. The spa? I need to figure out my skincare routine before the big day. The shopping? I'm trying to find the perfect look for our engagement photos. The dinner? I was entertaining my bridesmaids who are helping with everything." I backed off, not wanting to cause an argument, but I started paying closer attention. 3 months before the wedding, Claire announced her parents would need first-class tickets from Chicago to Austin for the wedding. "First class, is that necessary?" I asked. "My dad has back problems," she explained. "He can't sit in economy for that long." I didn't point out that Chicago to Austin is a 3-hour flight, or that her father seemed perfectly mobile when I'd met him, playing tennis and bragging about his golf game. But I nodded and watched as she booked 2 first-class round-trip tickets, $20,800 from our wedding account. 2 weeks later, it was a suite at the Four Seasons for her parents. They're contributing so much emotionally to this wedding. Another $3,200 for 5 nights. Then it was a $5,000 consultation fee to a wedding planner friend of her mother's who, as far as I could tell, had only created a Pinterest board and made 3 phone calls. By this point, I'd contributed nearly $45,000 to the wedding account, while Claire had managed to put in only about $8,000. When I mentioned the disparity, she burst into tears. "I can't believe you're keeping score. This is our wedding, Michael, not some business transaction. Do you even want to marry me?" And there it was, the guilt trip that seemed to end every financial discussion. I'd apologize, she'd forgive me, and nothing would change. Except I was starting to feel like a human ATM rather than a partner. One night, I came home early from work to find Claire and her bridesmaids, Jessica and Amber, sprawled across our living room, empty wine bottles scattered on the coffee table. They didn't notice me at first, and I overheard Claire mid-sentence. "So I told him the cake was $1,200, but it's actually only $600. The rest is going toward my maid of honor weekend in Cabo. What he doesn't know won't hurt him, right?" Jessica looked uncomfortable. "Claire, are you sure that's a good idea? Michael's been so generous with the wedding budget." "Oh, please," Claire waved dismissively. "He can afford it. You should see his investment accounts. Besides, I deserve a little fun before I'm tied down forever." I cleared my throat, and all 3 women whipped around, Claire's face draining of color. "Michael, you're home early. We were just wedding planning." She attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sounds like it," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Jessica, Amber, would you mind giving us a minute?" The 2 bridesmaids gathered their things and hurried out, Jessica avoiding eye contact as she passed me. "Before you get mad," Claire started as soon as the door closed, "it was just a joke. We were being silly." "A joke," I repeated. "So you haven't been lying about wedding expenses and pocketing the difference?" She hesitated just a beat too long. "Of course not. I can't believe you'd even think that." But her hesitation told me everything. That night we had our first real fight. Claire alternated between defensive anger and tearful apologies, eventually admitting she'd misrepresented a few expenses but insisting it wasn't a big deal in the grand scheme of things. Everyone does it, Michael. Wedding budgets always have a little wiggle room. This isn't about wiggle room, Claire. It's about honesty. If you wanted money for a trip with your friends, you could have just asked me directly. Would you have said yes? She challenged. I don't know, maybe, but at least we would have been honest with each other. We went to bed angry that night, the issue unresolved. The next morning, Claire was all sweetness and contrition, making my favorite breakfast and promising to be more transparent about wedding expenses. I wanted to believe her, but something had shifted. A crack had formed in the foundation of our relationship, and I couldn't unsee it. Over the next few weeks, I kept a closer eye on our finances, which only led to more discoveries. Claire had opened a credit card in her name, but listed our shared address, maxing it out at $12,000 on designer clothes and spa visits. When confronted, she claimed she was building her credit score and would pay it off with her share of the wedding gifts. Then I found emails confirming she'd secretly extended our honeymoon in Hawaii from 1 week to 2, upgrading our accommodations to a luxury suite, an additional $7,500 she hadn't discussed with me. Her explanation? She wanted to surprise me, as if spending thousands of dollars without consultation was a gift rather than a financial ambush. 2 months before the wedding, Claire's mother came to town to go dress shopping. I was working from home when they returned, shopping bags in hand, both glowing with excitement. Wait until you see my dress, Claire gushed. It's absolutely perfect. Can't wait, I said, genuinely happy to see her so excited. How much was it? A reasonable question, I thought, considering it was coming from our joint wedding fund. Claire and her mother exchanged looks. Michael, oh, her mother said with a condescending smile. A gentleman never asks about the cost of a wedding dress. It's bad luck. I laughed it off, but later checked the account to see a $2,500 charge to a bridal boutique. $12,000 for a dress she'd wear once. That night, I tried again to have a conversation about our finances. Claire, I'm not trying to ruin the wedding, but we need to talk about expenses. At this rate, we're going to spend over $100,000. So, she countered, you can afford it. And anyway, it's an investment in our future. Don't you want our wedding to be special? Of course I do. But what? You're being so cheap lately. Is this how it's going to be when we're married? You holding your money over my head? That's not fair. I've put in over 40 grand already. You promised to match my contributions, and you've barely put in anything. I didn't realize you were keeping a spreadsheet on my contributions. Real romantic, Michael. It's not about romance, it's about partnership. Marriage is partly a financial union, and right now it feels very one-sided. Fine, she snapped. I'll ask Daddy for help if you're going to be so difficult about everything. The conversation ended there, with Claire storming off to take a bath and me sitting alone, wondering when discussions about our future had become so contentious. The next day, Claire was all smiles again, as if our fight had never happened. She kissed me goodbye as I left for work, promising a special dinner that night to make up for everything. I came home to find the dining room transformed with candles, flowers, and the smell of my favorite meal, Claire's attempt at beef Wellington, which she'd only made once before on my birthday. She'd even opened a bottle of the expensive Cabernet we'd been saving. What's all this? I asked, touched by the effort. A peace offering, she said, wrapping her arms around my neck. I hate fighting with you, especially over something as silly as money. We had a lovely dinner, and later, as we were cuddled on the couch watching a movie, Claire brought up her parents again. They're really excited about the wedding, and she said, Mom keeps saying how happy she is that I found someone so stable and successful. That's nice, I replied, though something about the wording made me uneasy. They've always worried about me, Claire continued, especially since they can't really help financially. Dad's retirement didn't go as planned with the market crash, and they had to downsize their house. I nodded, having heard bits of this before. Claire's parents had once been comfortably upper middle class, but had hit some financial turbulence in recent years. Actually, Claire said, her voice taking on that careful tone that immediately put me on alert, I've been thinking about how we could help them. Help them how? Well, they've been renting since they sold their house, And rent keeps going up. It's eating into their fixed income, and they're worried about the future. I sat up straighter. What are you suggesting? Claire took a deep breath. What if we gave them one of your rental properties, the one on Oakwood Drive? It's the smallest one. And you always say it gives you the most maintenance headaches. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. When none came, I said, you want to give your parents a house, my house, the one worth nearly $500,000? It would be our house once we're married, she corrected gently. And yes, think about it. They could live there rent-free or even rent it out themselves for income. It would solve all their financial problems. Claire, that house is part of our retirement plan. It's an investment I worked years to afford. But we don't need it, she insisted. You have two others, plus your job, plus my income. We're doing fine. They're struggling. If they're struggling, we can help in other ways. Maybe cover some expenses monthly, or they don't want charity, Michael. They want security. Having their own property would give them that. But it's not charity when it's their daughter helping. But it is charity when it's me giving away a house I worked for years to buy. That doesn't make sense. Claire's eyes narrowed slightly. I thought you were generous. I thought family meant something to you. My generosity doesn't extend to giving away houses worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to people I've met 4 times, I said, my voice rising despite my effort to stay calm. And they're not my family yet. Well, they will be in 2 months. Unless, she let the word hang in the air. Unless what? Unless you're not as committed to this marriage as you claim to be. And there it was, the ultimatum, thinly veiled but unmistakable. I took a deep breath. Claire, this is a huge decision that affects our financial future. We can't make it impulsively. Let's sleep on it and talk more tomorrow. She didn't look happy, but she agreed, and we went to bed with a tension between us that felt different from our previous disagreements. This wasn't about a wedding venue or first-class tickets. This was about the fundamental question of what I owed her family simply by marrying their daughter. The next morning, Claire left early for a wedding emergency meeting with her bridesmaids, giving me space to think, and think I did, about our relationship, about money, about the future I had envisioned versus the one that seemed to be unfolding. On a hunch, I called my property manager, Brian, who oversaw the Oakwood Drive house. Hey, Brian, quick question. Has anyone come by to look at the Oakwood property recently? Anyone not a tenant? There was a pause on the line. Yeah, actually. A couple in their 60s said they were friends of yours and were considering buying a similar property in the neighborhood. Wanted to see the layout. The tenants weren't happy about the short notice, but since you had apparently approved it, my stomach dropped. When was this? About 3 weeks ago. The woman who arranged it said she was your fiancée. Claire, right? Right. Thanks, Brian. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. Claire had taken her parents to see the house without telling me, presumably to show them their future home before I'd agreed to anything. I spent the rest of the day investigating. I checked emails. Claire's password was our anniversary date, not exactly Fort Knox security. There I found correspondence with a property appraiser from a month earlier, getting a valuation on the Oakwood house. I found messages to her parents discussing how they could manage the property for extra income after the wedding. And most damning of all, I found a draft email to a lawyer inquiring about how to transfer property between spouses and the tax implications thereof. She'd been planning to wait until after we were married, when she'd have more legal claim to my assets. The Claire I thought I knew, the warm, fun-loving woman I'd fallen for, suddenly seemed like a stranger, or worse, like someone who had targeted me from the beginning for financial gain. When she came home that evening, I was waiting in the living room with a glass of bourbon, all the evidence printed out and arranged neatly in a folder on the coffee table. How was your emergency meeting? I asked casually. Exhausting, she sighed dramatically. Bridesmaid drama. Jessica and Amber are fighting over their dresses again. I don't know why I picked such difficult friends. I nodded, taking a sip of my drink. Hey, I've been thinking about what you said, about the house. Her face brightened instantly. Really? What are your thoughts? I'm curious. When did you first get the idea to give your parents my property? She shrugged. It just came to me recently, seeing how they're struggling. Why? Recently, not, say, a month ago when you had the property appraised, or 3 weeks ago when you took them to see it without telling me? The color drained from Claire's face. What are you talking about? I slid the folder across the coffee table. You should have used a different password for your email, or at least deleted your messages with the appraiser and the lawyer. She stared at the folder but didn't touch it. You went through my email? That's a violation of privacy. Funny how that's your first concern, not the fact that you were planning to take my property. Our property, she corrected automatically, then seemed to realize her mistake. No, Claire. My property. Bought with my money before I've ever met you. Property you apparently felt entitled to dispose of without my knowledge or consent. You're twisting everything, she said, her voice rising. I was just exploring options to help my parents. They've had such a hard time. Save it, I interrupted. I've read the emails, Claire. This wasn't about helping your parents through a rough patch. This was about transferring a significant asset from me to them, permanently. She switched tactics, tears welling in her eyes. I can't believe you don't trust me. After everything we've been through, you spy on me and then accuse me of, what, being a gold digger? Is that what you think of me? I think, I said slowly, that you've been spending our wedding fund on personal expenses. I think you've contributed a fraction of what I have while expecting me to cover everything. And I think you were planning to wait until after the wedding to push for this property transfer because you'd have more legal leverage then. That's ridiculous. I love you, Michael. I want to marry you because of who you are, not what you own. Prove it, I challenged. Call your parents right now. Tell them they won't be getting my house. Tell them we'll help in more reasonable ways, maybe a monthly stipend to supplement their income. See how they react. Claire's expression hardened. I'm not calling my parents so you can test their reaction like some kind of sick game. Because you know what they'll say. They'll be angry that the golden goose is backing out. Don't you dare speak about my family that way, she shouted, jumping to her feet. They're good people who've had bad luck. Not that you'd understand. You with your precious financial discipline and your rental properties. Some of us have had to struggle. I struggled too, I reminded her. I worked my ass off for everything I have. I didn't expect anyone to hand me a $500,000 house as a wedding present. She paced the room, running her hands through her hair. So that's it? You won't help my parents? Not by giving them a house, no. That's completely unreasonable, and you know it. Claire stopped pacing and looked me directly in the eyes. Then the wedding is off. Despite everything I'd discovered, despite knowing this was likely coming, the words still hit me like a physical blow. You're calling off our wedding because I won't give your parents a house? I'm calling it off because you clearly don't value my family, because you don't trust me, because you'd rather believe I'm some kind of con artist than the woman who loves you. I took a long breath, steadying myself. Claire, I wanted to marry you. I wanted to build a life with you, but this, the secret plans, the ultimatums, using our relationship as leverage to get what you want, this isn't love, it's manipulation. So that's your final answer? My parents get nothing? Your parents get a son-in-law who respects boundaries and doesn't get guilted into financial decisions he's not comfortable with. Or they get nothing at all, your choice. She stared at me, tears streaming down her face, but there was calculation behind those tears now that I could see clearly. Then I choose nothing at all. I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. I'll pack some things and stay at a hotel tonight. We can figure out the logistics tomorrow. Fine, she snapped. Take your precious houses and your trust issues and go. As I packed a bag, Claire made phone calls in the living room, loud enough for me to hear. First to her mother, he's backing out, Mom. No, he won't help with anything. He's being completely unreasonable. Then to her bridesmaids, spinning a tale of betrayal with me as the villain. When I emerged with my suitcase, she was curled on the couch, looking small and defeated. For a moment, I felt a pang of doubt. Had I overreacted? Was I throwing away a relationship over money? Claire, I said softly, if you want to talk about this rationally, set reasonable expectations, figure out how we can help your parents in a way that Works for both of us. I'm willing to try. She looked up, and for a split second, I saw something like calculation cross her face before it settled into righteous anger. There's nothing to talk about. You've made your position clear. So have I. And that was it. I walked out the door. Engagement effectively ended. Wedding called off. Relationship in tatters. All because I wouldn't sign over a house worth nearly $500,000 to people I barely knew. The next few days were a blur of practical arrangements. I returned to the apartment when Claire was at work to collect more of my belongings. I contacted vendors to cancel wedding arrangements, many of whom were sympathetic but still enforced their cancellation policies. That was another $15,000 down the drain, but at least it wasn't a house. News of our breakup spread quickly through our social circle. Claire's version, that I had suddenly become controlling and miserly, refusing to help her struggling parents, gained traction among her friends. My version, that she had issued an unreasonable ultimatum tied to an astronomical gift, resonated with mine. Most mutual friends stayed diplomatically neutral, expressing sadness that things hadn't worked out, but avoiding taking sides. I discovered something interesting during this time. Claire had been telling her friends different stories about my finances for months. To some, she'd described me as practically a millionaire, an exaggeration. To others, she'd complained about my cheapness because I refused to fund her shopping sprees. The picture that emerged was of a woman who saw me primarily as a meal ticket, a financial resource to be exploited rather than a partner to build a life with. A week after the blow-up, I met with my lawyer to ensure Claire had no claim on any of my properties. He assured me that since we weren't married and her name wasn't on any deeds, she had no legal standing. Still, he advised documenting everything, the emails, the appraiser contact, the draft to the lawyer, just in case. She might try to claim she contributed to the mortgage or maintenance, and he warned, better safe than sorry. I also discovered that Claire had emptied our wedding account the day after our fight, about $22,000 that was left of my contributions. Legally, I could have fought it since most of that money was mine, but I decided to let it go. Consider it the price of discovering her true character before we were legally bound. Besides, my lawyer advised that pursuing the money might give Claire grounds to make counterclaims about emotional distress or verbal promises. Sometimes the cheapest way to pay is with money, he said, and I had to agree. $22,000 was a bargain compared to the financial devastation that could have happened if we'd gotten married. 10 days after the breakup, I received a disturbing call from one of my tenants in another rental property. Mr. Wheeler, this is Allison from the Parkview house. There was a woman here yesterday asking all kinds of questions about the property, when I moved in, how much rent I pay, if you're a good landlord. She said she was conducting a survey, but it felt off. A chill ran down my spine. What did she look like? Blonde, early 30s, very well dressed. She had an older couple with her, said they were her parents. Claire, she was scoping out my other properties now. I thanked Allison and immediately called my other tenants to warn them not to share any information with strangers. Then I called my lawyer again, who suggested sending Claire a cease and desist letter. This is bordering on harassment, he said gravely. She has no right to inspect your properties or interrogate your tenants. The letter went out that afternoon. Claire's response was a text message. Really, Michael? Lawyers? I was just showing my parents the neighborhood. You're being paranoid. But I knew better. She was fishing for information, perhaps looking for ammunition to use against me or weaknesses in my property ownership that she could exploit. 2 weeks post-breakup, I was settling into a furnished apartment downtown while looking for a new permanent place. I'd given Claire 2 months to find somewhere else to live, as her name wasn't on my lease either. I wasn't cruel about it. I even offered to cover her first month's rent somewhere new. But I needed a clean break. That's when the texts started. First conciliatory. I miss you. Can we talk? Then accusatory. You're really going to throw away 2 years over money? What kind of person does that? Then desperate. My parents are devastated. We could have worked something out. Please reconsider. I didn't respond to any of them. What was there to say? She'd shown me who she really was. Someone who saw me primarily as a meal ticket, a source of financial security for herself and her family. Someone who would use emotional manipulation to get what she wanted. someone who had likely targeted me from the beginning for my financial stability rather than who I was as a person. 3 weeks after the breakup, I ran into Jessica, one of Claire's bridesmaids, at a coffee shop. I tried to duck out before she saw me, but she caught my eye and waved me over. "Michael," she said, her expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay," I said, shifting uncomfortably. "Look, I don't want to put you in an awkward position. I know you're Claire's friend." Jessica sighed. "Actually, that might be past tense at this point. We had a falling out." My curiosity got the better of me. "About?" She hesitated, then said, "Claire wanted to stay in your apartment until the lease ended, then have you cover her moving expenses since, in her words, you're the one with all the money." When I suggested that might not be reasonable given the circumstances, she accused me of taking your side. Things escalated from there. I shook my head. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be, it was illuminating." Jessica stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "You know, she talked about your financial situation a lot, even before you were engaged. She'd mention your properties, your investments, how you were so much more established than other guys she dated." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. "She did?" Jessica nodded. "At the time, I thought she was just proud of you. Now I wonder if—" She trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "If she was with me for my money all along," they finished. "I shouldn't have said anything," Jessica backpedaled. "It's not my place." "No, I appreciate the honesty. It helps confirm what I already suspected." "There's something else you should know," Jessica called after me. I turned back. "Claire's been seeing someone, some real estate developer she met at a charity event 2 weeks ago. They've already been on several dates." The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. Had Claire been cultivating a backup plan all along? Or had she simply moved on to a new target when I proved less exploitable than she'd hoped? "Thanks for telling me," I said, genuinely grateful for the information, despite the sting. A month after the breakup, I received a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Michael Wheeler." My voice was all business. "Michael, it's Patricia, Claire's mother." I almost hung up, but decided to hear her out. "What do you want, Patricia?" "I'm calling because I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Claire tells me you believe we were trying to, what was it, con you out of your property?" "That's one way to put it." "That's absurd. We were just exploring options to secure our retirement. Claire was trying to help us, that's all. She's always been such a devoted daughter. By demanding I sign over a house worth $500,000 as a condition of our marriage, that's not devotion, that's extortion." Patricia's voice hardened. "You know, I never thought you were good enough for my daughter. Claire could have married a doctor or a lawyer, someone truly successful. Instead, she chose you, with your little rental houses and your penny-pinching ways." I had to laugh at the absurdity. "Your daughter chose me precisely because of those rental houses, Patricia, and now that she can't get her hands on them, suddenly I'm not good enough? Interesting timing." "You'll regret this," she hissed. "Claire is the best thing that ever happened to you." "No, Patricia. The best thing that ever happened to me was discovering what you and Claire were planning before I signed a marriage certificate. Give your daughter my regards." I hung up, blocked her number, and felt lighter than I had in weeks. 5 weeks after the breakup, I received a visit from Dan, Claire's father, at my office. He'd somehow talked his way past reception, claiming he had an appointment. "Mr. Daniels," I said coolly as he entered my office, "what can I do for you?" He closed the door behind him and sat down without being invited. "We need to talk, son, man to man." "I'm not your son, and we have nothing to discuss." "Look," he leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I know things ended badly with Claire, but this is about family, about doing the right thing." "The right thing?" I repeated incredulously. "Like sneaking behind my back to scope out my property? Like issuing ultimatums about my assets?" "That was all a misunderstanding," he insisted. "Claire got ahead of herself, that's all. She wanted to surprise you with a solution for everyone. Her heart was in the right place." "Her heart was set on taking my house," I corrected, "and you were more than happy to go along with it." Dan's facade of reasonableness slipped a notch. That house was going to be a wedding gift, a show of good faith. Now you've humiliated my daughter, broken her heart, and left her with nothing. She walked away with $22,000 of my money from our wedding account, I pointed out. Hardly nothing. Pocket change for someone like you, he dismissed with a wave. And there it is, I said quietly. The real issue. You see me as a bank account, not a person. Claire did too. Dan's expression darkened. You listen to me. Claire deserves better than some tight-fisted landlord who values property over people. You think you're so smart, catching us out. You've made an enemy you can't afford. Is that a threat, Mr. Daniels? It's a promise. Austin's a small town in some ways. I have friends here, people who listen to me. Your reputation won't survive this. I stood up, signaling the end of our conversation. I think you should leave now. And if you or Claire or anyone in your family contacts me again, I'll be filing for harassment. He left, but not without a parting shot. You'll wish you'd given us that house, Michael. Mark my words. True to his word, Dan seemed determined to make my life difficult. Rumors began circulating in my professional circles that I was financially unstable, that I treated women poorly, that I was unreliable in business dealings. Thankfully, my reputation and track record spoke for themselves, and most people recognized the rumors for what they were. A smear campaign. 6 weeks after what would have been our wedding day, I received an email from Claire. Michael, I've had time to reflect on everything that happened between us. While I still believe you misinterpreted my intentions regarding my parents and the property, I can see how it appeared from your perspective. I'm writing to let you know I've found a new place and will be out of the apartment by the end of the month. I won't be taking you up on your offer to cover the first month's rent. I don't want anything from you anymore. I've also met someone who appreciates me for who I am, not what I can bring financially. He's already talking about buying us a house in Westlake. No strings attached. I hope someday you can look back on our time together and remember the good moments, not just how it ended, Claire. I didn't respond. The email confirmed what Jessica had told me. Claire had already moved on to a new target, another man with money who might be more pliable than I had proven to be. I almost felt sorry for him. A week later, I was having dinner with a friend when he mentioned hearing about Claire's new boyfriend. Gregory Thompson, he said, real estate developer. Word is he's having some financial difficulties. 3 of his projects are behind schedule and over budget. Investors are getting nervous. Interesting timing for Claire to enter his life, I mused. Very, and get this, he's already added her to some of his accounts. They've been dating, 2 months? I shook my head. Some people never learn. You dodged a bullet, man. More like a financial nuclear missile. 2 months after our breakup, I received a call from Brian, my property manager, with surprising news. You'll never guess who just applied to rent the Oakwood property, he said, amusement evident in his voice. Who? Claire Daniels and Gregory Thompson. Apparently, his financial situation isn't as solid as Claire thought. Those rumors about his development projects being in trouble are true. They're looking for a temporary place while they reassess their options. The irony was almost too perfect. At the same house Claire had tried to get me to sign over to her parents, she now wanted to rent with her new boyfriend, who turned out to be less financially secure than she'd hoped. What did you tell them? I asked. That the property was no longer available for rent, Brian chuckled. I didn't mention who owned it. Should have seen her face when she found out it was yours. Later that day, I received one final text from Claire. Real mature, Michael. Denying our rental application out of spite. Greg says it's a blessing in disguise. The house was overpriced anyway. We found a much better place in a much better neighborhood. I guess you taught me one valuable lesson. Never trust a man who cares more about money than people. I didn't bother responding. There was nothing left to say. 3 months after the breakup, I received an unexpected visitor at my new apartment. Amber, Claire's other bridesmaid. I thought you should know, she said without preamble. Claire and Greg broke up. He found out she'd been charging thousands of dollars to his credit cards without his knowledge. Designer clothes, spa treatments, the works. When he confronted her, she said she deserved it after what you put her through. I wasn't surprised, just sad that another person had been hurt by Claire's financial manipulations. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Amber shrugged. Because you were right about her. And because she's been talking about reconnecting with you, saying how she made a terrible mistake and wants another chance. That's not going to happen, I assured her. I figured, but I thought you deserved a warning. She's desperate now. Her parents are pressuring her to find someone stable again. I thanked Amber for the heads up and strengthened my resolve to keep Claire firmly in my past. Sure enough, a week later, Claire appeared at my door, looking subdued and contrite. Michael, she said softly, can we talk? We have nothing to say to each other, Claire. Please, I've changed. I've realized what's truly important. She attempted to step closer, but I blocked the doorway. I made a terrible mistake. I was scared about the future, about my parents' situation, and I handled it all wrong. Did you handle Gregory Thompson all wrong too? I asked pointedly. She flinched. You heard about that. Austin is a small town, like your father said. That was different. Greg and I weren't right for each other. Because he caught you stealing from him, I supplied. Claire's expression hardened momentarily before she controlled it. That's not what happened, but I'm not here to talk about Greg. I'm here about us, about the connection we had that was real despite everything. There is no us, Claire. There's you looking for financial security at any cost. And there's me, thankful I discovered that before we got married. You're really going to throw away everything we had over one misunderstanding? It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a pattern of behavior that showed me exactly who you are. She tried a different angle, tears welling in her eyes. My parents are really struggling, Michael. Dad's medical bills are piling up. They might lose their rental. I don't know where they'll go. That's not my problem, I said firmly. And the fact that you're still trying to use them to manipulate me just proves I made the right decision. You heartless bastard, she hissed, the facade crumbling. You think you're so much better than everyone else with your financial planning and your investment properties. You'll end up alone with your money, and I hope it keeps you warm at night. Better alone than with someone who sees me as an ATM rather than a partner. Goodbye, Claire. I closed the door on her mid-protest and blocked her number on my phone. That was the last time I saw her in person. 6 months after our breakup, I heard through the grapevine that Claire had moved back to Chicago with her parents. Apparently, her reputation in Austin had suffered enough that she'd struggled to find both romantic prospects and employment opportunities. Her marketing career had stalled when rumors of her financial manipulation spread through our professional circles. The woman who had once charmed everyone she met had revealed her true colors to too many people. As for me, I kept the house on Oakwood Drive. After the whole ordeal, I decided to address those maintenance issues that had been plaguing the property. I hired a new contractor who completely renovated the plumbing and electrical systems that had been giving me headaches for years. Now the place generates even more reliable monthly income with far fewer emergency calls. I focused on my financial consulting business, which thrived despite Dan Daniels' attempts to damage my reputation. And while I wasn't in a rush to start dating again, I felt optimistic about the future. The engagement ring sat in a safe deposit box at my bank. I'd initially considered selling it the day after our breakup, but something stopped me. Not sentimentality, that was long gone, but a practical reminder of what happens when you ignore warning signs in a relationship. Maybe someday I'd sell it and put the money toward a down payment on another investment property. That would be the perfect symbolic ending, turning what was meant to be a token of manipulation into something that would continue to build my financial security.